He's my favorite player on the 49ers. I have, before I name my favorite player, I'm going to talk about the different position groups because I feel like they all have personality types and I have a favorite. They're all interesting. Offensive linemen are very interesting, but I've never really had that close a relationship with any of them. Not McGlinchey, not McKivitz, not Feliciano, not Brendel. I like Aaron Banks. I went up to Aaron Banks this year and told him that I'm from Oakland. He's from Alameda. He's an East Bay guy. And I feel like East Bay isn't that big. And if you're from here, then you know someone and you have mutual friends with everyone who's from here. So it's my East Bay guy. I like Aaron Banks a lot. But he's not my favorite player I've covered. It's only been a few years with Banks. I don't know him that well. Offensive linemen are very interesting, thoughtful. Tight ends can be very flamboyant. And I consider myself to be flamboyant. Animated. Vernon Davis. George Kittle. But sometimes I feel like tight ends, like, they're almost, the good ones are like caricatures. You know what I mean? Isn't Travis Kelce a bit of a caricature? George, like, when they get to this level, it's like, what's the real George? So it's not Kittle, although I like covering Kittle. Wide receivers are tough, especially when they're good, because they're usually like 25 and they have the biggest ego on the team. I wouldn't say wide receivers are necessarily my favorite players in the team. Backup quarterbacks are cool because they have no ego and they have this incredible vision of what's going on. Starting quarterbacks are tough to get around, although Brock Purdy's different. He's got the mentality of a backup. Running backs are interesting, but they're often very serious, and I've never really had that close a relationship with any running back on the team. Frank Gore didn't like me, although he came up to me during training camp last year. Have I told the story? He came up to me during training camp last year. He didn't remember that I covered him, but he was like, "Hey, man, aren't you that dude that got into it with Javon Kinlaw?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he just laughed. He laughed. By the way, I said goodbye to Javon Kinlaw before he left. After the NFC Championship game. I didn't tell anyone this. But after the NFC Championship game, I went up to Javon in his locker. I hadn't talked to him since all that happened. And I said, "Hey, Javon." And he turned, and he said, and he just looked at me. And I said, "Congratulations." And he said, "Thank you." And that was that. Javon Kinlaw actually is one of the, I will look back on the Javon Kinlaw eras. I enjoyed covering him. What an explosive way to meet someone. People don't realize that was the first day I met him in person when that thing happened. I had never met him before, and that was a quirk of the pandemic. But yeah, I said congrats. He said thanks, and that was sort of the goodbye. I wonder if I'll ever see him again. But I liked him. Defensive linemen are sensitive. Have you noticed that? Defensive linemen are sensitive. I don't get it. Linebackers are like little coaches on the field. Robert Saleh. Fred Warner is like Robert Saleh Jr. And I like Robert Saleh, but Fred Warner is like doing a Robert Saleh impression as opposed to just being himself. Dre Greenlaw is a lot of fun. He's cool. I like him a lot. I guess what I want to say is the players on defense who are involved in the highest velocity collisions are my favorite. Not the defensive linemen, although they're cool, but those are guys, in hand-to-hand combat. The ones who run around and try to take your head off are my favorite players, and I don't know why. They're the most vicious. They look like they're normal. They're about my size, about 5'10 to 6'2, 180 to 210. They're like normal people. And when you talk to them in the locker room, they're very usually quiet and businesslike. Like they're in their alter ego. They kind of come across as superheroes. You see them in the locker room, they look normal, but you get on the field and they'll kill you. I like those guys. So Greenlaw's like that. Jimmy Ward was like that. Jimmy Ward is one of my favorite players ever to cover. Travarius Ward is like that. He's really, really funny. Travarius Ward. And approachable. One of the things, like, there's a lot of women in the locker room that cover the team. And I wonder how comfortable they are going up to certain players because some guys can be standoffish. He's always talking to any female reporter who wants to know something about the Niners. He's very approachable. Seems like a good guy. He'll talk to guys too. Diamador Lenore is really cool. He's wait a couple years on him. He's got a voice. He's got something to say. He's just really young. But my favorite player really on the team right now is Talanoa Hufanga. I really like Talanoa Hufanga to the point where I can't even really talk about him objectively anymore. I like him. He's not my friend, but when I see him, he'll say hello to me. He knows my name. I'll say hello to him. He's just a really good guy. And what to me makes a young athlete a good guy is someone who's interested in other people. That's the thing about DBs. They're vicious on the field, but then you talk to them in the locker room and they're like, they have this very soft voice. Hey man, how you doing? What's going on with you? They ask you questions. It's incredible. Only position group I think in football that really is interested in other people. DBs. Maybe because they're going to kill you later. I don't know why they're interested in you, but they are. And like Talanoa last year early on, like I was talking to him and he would say stuff like, hey man, just want you to know I really like your show. I get it. Like, really? How many football players get what I do? A lot of them don't. And even if they do, how many of them would have the guts to say it to me in front of their teammates when so many of their teammates don't like me? I really like Talanoa and I hope they keep him. Because it's nice to have one person on the team that I get along with. When they got rid of Jimmy Ward, that hurt. That was my guy. I could go up to him every day. How you doing? What's going on with you? A lot of players on this team don't like me because of what happened with Kinlaw. Fair enough. Talanoa wasn't one of them. And I respect the guy who doesn't just go along with, because it seems like when you're on a team, there's a lot of pressure to have a united front. We don't like that reporter. We all don't like him. Well, Talanoa's his own person. Jimmy Ward was his own person. They think for themselves. Tight ends think for themselves. Do offensive linemen think for themselves? They're a unit. You think of the secondary as a unit, but they're a bunch of little assassins. I'm sorry. Dante Whitner, super nice, really well put together. Assassin. Deshaun Goldson, super laid back and chill. Assassin. Jimmy Ward will kill you. Super nice guy. I love DBs. Particularly safeties. Corners can be a little touchy. Richard Sherman. They get beat and they don't want to talk about it. Safeties, you don't really know when safeties get beat. You only really notice safeties when they're destroying someone. And I think they play on that. Like, oh, you think I'm this vicious? No, man, I'm a family guy. I'm a businessman. Like, yeah, okay. Talanoa Hufanga is my favorite player on the team. Please extend him. What happened with Huff being on the show? I'm going to tell you what happened with Huff being on the show. It's clear he was uncomfortable about it. Like, I was going to do a weekly show with Ray McLeod. As soon as he announced it publicly, I believe he got a bunch of calls from teammates being like, don't do this. So I don't think Talanoa wants that smoke. I don't think he needs it. So instead of him saying, I can't do it, he was like, I'll do one, maybe later. And I just was like, look, man, I even went up to him halfway through the season, like, look, dude, I can tell you have anxiety about this. You don't have to do it. We're good. And he like thanked me. He doesn't really do media. And he had a tough time saying no to me because we get along. But I let him off the hook. Maybe later in his career when he's got a little bit. I think it's tough to do those interviews before you're like 30 years old. And if you go back and think about it, Jimmy Ward did it and then they got rid of him. If you want to have a future with an organization and you want to get an extension, maybe don't do a show with Grant Cohn. I didn't want to put him in that position. I think it's the kind of thing you do when you know you're leaving. And in retrospect, when Jimmy Ward did that show with me, I wonder if he knew he was leaving. It's like, well, hey man, they're screwing me over. Fuck it. I'll go talk to Grant. So Hufanga, God love him. He's like 23. He's not there yet. He still needs to protect his interest with the 49ers. I let him off the hook. And I don't want to be in a position where I'm begging any player on the team to come on my show because I don't need him. And I don't want to be compromised. I need to be able to say, hey, Talanoa, you blew it on this play. hey, Ray McLeod, you should have jumped on the ball. Imagine if I had been doing a weekly show with Ray McLeod and then he blew it in the Super Bowl and I would have had to been like, hey, well, that's my co-host. I can't really say anything. Like, I don't want to be in that position. I'm only loyal to BetUS and my sponsors. No one on the team. So that's what happened with Huff on the show.